Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, I want to be completely honest with you right out of the gate.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know. I thought I knew exactly what we're getting into today. I mean, I saw the reading list and I saw the cover art for this one.
Right, the bright yellow cover.
Exactly, the bright yellow cover and that iconic little monkey. And I just thought, okay, we're doing a nostalgia trip today. We're going to talk about childhood.
And how long did that feeling last for you?
About, I don't know, page 4, maybe?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Because the source material you brought for us today, this book, 5 Pounds by Robert Walker, it is entirely not a warm, fuzzy biography. It's a survival thriller.
It really is.
It just happens to be about literally the most famous monkey in the world.
I think that is the absolute best way to frame it, because when you and I and everyone listening, when we see Curious George today on a lunchbox or a t-shirt or sitting in a kindergarten library, we just see safety.
Right, pure innocence.
Exactly. We see this permanent, happy cultural icon. But the reality that Robert Walker unpacks in this book is that that monkey was born in a bathtub while the Nazis were literally marching toward the front door.
It's actually really jarring to think about. I mean, the core premise of our deep dive today is that Curious George fundamentally shouldn't exist.
Statistically speaking, no.
Statistically, he should have burned in a fireplace in 1940, along with everything else in that apartment in Paris.
We are looking at a historical miracle. And what Walker does so brilliantly in 5 Pounds is he completely strips away that cartoon veneer.
Yeah, he doesn't pull any punches.
Not at all. He takes us right back to June 1940, to the fall of Paris, and he focuses on 2 specific people, Hans and Margret Rey.
And they are German Jews.
Right, German Jews who are trapped in a city that is actively collapsing around them.
And they have to get out.
Yeah.
But the image that really stuck with me, and I want to get into this right away because it's literally the title of the book, is the concept of the 5 pounds.
Yes, it is the central metaphor for their entire experience.
And it's literal I mean, the manuscript itself actually weighed 5 pounds.
Physically, yes. We're talking about high-stock watercolor paper, hardbound covers, folios. It is heavy, dense stuff.
Right.
But I want you to just think about what 5 pounds actually represents when you are fleeing a literal war zone on foot or on a bicycle. 5 pounds is absolutely not trivial.
No, I was actually thinking about this when I went backpacking last summer. You obsess over ounces.
Yeah.
I mean, people will cut the handles off their toothbrushes just to save a fraction of an ounce.
Exactly. And that's just for a hobby. Now imagine you aren't hiking for fun. You are running for your actual life.
The stakes couldn't be higher.
5 pounds in that context is 3 days of drinking water. It's 2 entire loaves of dense survival bread. It's a spare pair of heavy boots.
Or ammunition if you had a weapon.
Right. That is the calculation you're making. You're standing in your apartment. The artillery is literally shaking the window glass, and you have to decide, do I carry the food that keeps my physical body alive? Or do I carry this stack of painted paper?
Wow. And that's the crux of Walker's whole argument, isn't it? He argues that this isn't just a basic choice about packing luggage.
No, it's a profound choice about identity.
Right, because if they drop the book, they might move a lot faster.
They'd be lighter, they'd survive the physical road more easily. But Walker's insight here is that if they drop the book, they arrive in America as just refugees. They lose the core thing that makes them who they are. They lose their identities as creators.
So it's almost like if they drop the book, the fascists win in a way.
In a deeply spiritual and psychological sense, yes. If they drop the book, they stop being artists and they just become victims of the state.
Which perfectly sets up our mission for this deep dive. Today we are going to track this massive escape mile by terrified mile.
It is quite the journey.
We're going to talk about bicycles built out of absolute junk diplomas stamped by unsung heroes and how a simple cartoon monkey essentially became a weapon against fascism.
I'm ready when you are.
Let's jump right into part 1, the collapse. The setting is Paris. It's June 1940, and the way Walker describes the sensory details here is just terrifying.
It really paints a picture.
It's not just a standard history textbook, oh, war is coming. It's the actual smell of the city.
That detail really stood out to me too, the smell of the diplomatic archives burning.
Right. Because the government knew what was happening.
Exactly. The French government knew Paris was going to fall to the Germans, so they just started systematically incinerating all their classified documents.
Millions of pages.
Walker describes the air smelling strongly of sulfur, of melting sealing wax and burning vellum. It created this suffocating, heavy chemical fog just hanging over the entire city.
Can you just imagine waking up to that specific smell? It's literally the smell of a government giving up.
It is the scent of the end of an era. Total systemic collapse. And right amidst all this chaos, we have Hans Rey.
Sitting in his apartment.
Yes. He's a German Jew, but he's holding a Brazilian passport and he's living in the Montmartre district. And he's sitting there calmly sketching this little monkey.
A monkey that was originally named Fifi, by the way.
I know, right? Fifi.
It's so weird to hear.
The name Curious George came much later for the American market. But yes, he's sketching Fifi in his bathtub.
Because it's the safest place in the apartment if the glass shatters from the bombs.
Precisely. It's such a powerful juxtaposition when you really picture it.
Yeah, you have this intense vibration traveling right at the wooden legs of his drafting table. Artillery fire that's maybe only 5 miles outside the city limits.
And right there on the paper, he's just carefully mixing his water with bright pigments to paint a little monkey smiling.
It borders on the absurd.
It is absolutely absurd, but it's also deeply defiant. He is stubbornly refusing to let the reality of the war enter the reality of the paper.
But eventually the reality does hit. They have to leave. The Germans are too close. But here's the massive problem that I think we easily forget in our modern age of ride shares and high-speed rail.
Right. When a city like that collapses, the underlying infrastructure just vanishes instantly.
It's a total system failure. Walker details Margret Rey going out to the main train stations, the Gare du Nord, the Gare de Lyon, and just finding them totally locked down or completely overrun by mobs.
The station masters aren't even selling tickets anymore. They're literally burning the tickets in steel barrels.
And the taxis.
All gone. Every single one has been commandeered by the French army, or they've already fled south with the wealthy citizens who could pay exorbitant fares.
So the Reys are totally trapped. They're trapped in a city about to be occupied by a regime that wants them dead. And they have no car, no train, no taxi.
This is where we really get to see the dynamic between Hans and Margret, and I found this completely fascinating.
Me too. Because if you look at the standard history books, Hans usually gets the lion's share of the credit for Curious George.
Right, because he's the illustrator. But reading Walker's book, you realize Margret is the absolute boss.
Margret is the engine driving them.
Exactly. Hans is the artist. He's the dreamer. He's the one trying to perfect the shade of brown on the monkey. But Margret is the architect.
Literally, she trained as one, right?
Yes, she actually studied at the Bauhaus in Germany. So her entire worldview deals in function, in calculation, and in structural integrity.
So while Hans is sitting there trying to emotionally process the heavy weight of abandoning their home, Margret is just coldly running the numbers.
She's doing the brutal math of survival. She realizes immediately, we cannot walk to the Spanish border. It's hundreds of miles. That's too slow. We will be caught. We absolutely need wheels.
But there are no bicycles left anywhere in Paris. Every single shop has been looted or completely sold out for days.
So they have this incredible MacGyver moment. Hans goes down to a local junk dealer, and the inventory of what he actually manages to find is just sad.
It's essentially garbage.
It's the debris left over from a citywide panic. Walker lists out exactly what Hans bought. A rusty touring bike frame that had a snapped chain.
Okay.
A heavy delivery boy's cycle that had a severely bent front fork. And a set of handlebars ripped off a child's scooter with melted rubber grips.
This is literally scrap metal.
It's trash.
And he buys this pile of junk anyway.
He buys the whole pile. And his terrifying task is that he has to build 2 functioning long-distance bicycles out of this trash before the Nazis arrive.
Now, hold on a second. I'm not a bicycle mechanic by any stretch,
Yeah.
but I do know that bicycle parts from different eras and styles aren't just universally interchangeable.
Not at all.
You can't just slap a heavy-duty delivery bike chain onto a sleek touring bike sprocket.
Yeah.
They have completely different pitches.
Exactly. The gears physically do not mesh.
Yeah.
The teeth on the sprocket, that's the big gear down by the pedals, they were way too thick for the narrow chain he found. It physically would not fit over the teeth.
So what on earth do you do? It's 1940. You don't have a modern machine shop. You don't have electric angle grinders. The city's electricity is probably spotty at best anyway.
You have to use exactly what you have on hand. Hans sits down on the hard tile of his kitchen floor. He goes into a drawer and he grabs a kitchen knife, Specifically, Walker notes it was a Sabatier chef's knife.
A high-carbon steel
Yeah.
chef's knife.
Yes, because high-carbon steel is significantly harder than the cheap cast iron of the bicycle sprocket, so he just starts filing.
Oh, man.
Just try to imagine that awful sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. He is manually shaving down the iron teeth of this thick gear using the blade of a kitchen knife.
Filing down iron blocks with a cooking knife.
Yeah.
That sounds excruciatingly slow.
Walker describes his knuckles repeatedly slipping and hitting the abrasive floor, the skin breaking open, the blood physically mixing with the thick black grease on the tiles.
Wow.
This isn't a quick training montage in a movie where the bike is built in 10 seconds set to upbeat music. This is hours and hours of agonizing, repetitive physical labor.
And the stakes are just astronomical. What happens if he gets the angle wrong?
It's life or death. If he files off too much iron, the chain slips entirely and they have no propulsion. If he doesn't file off quite enough, the chain jams and snaps under pressure.
And if that chain fails, while they are out on the open road with the German Luftwaffe flying overhead,
They stop moving, and if they stop moving on that road, they get caught by the advancing army.
it brings a whole new, terrifying meaning to the phrase precision engineering. He is quite literally carving their escape route out of solid iron using a kitchen utensil.
All while the apartment windows are continuously rattling from the German artillery getting closer. It's the ultimate contrast. Deep domestic intimacy meeting industrial mechanized warfare.
Incredible. And while he's bleeding all over the kitchen floor, Margaret is doing the packing.
Yeah.
And this is exactly where the concept of the 5 pounds comes back into play.
Yes.
She is packing what Walker calls the arithmetic of survival. Hard, dense cheese, heavy wool socks, water canteens.
She is utterly ruthless about it. Every single ounce is weighed in her mind, and then she picks up the manuscript. The Adventures of Fifi.
67 pages of typed text and 40 original watercolors.
And she has to make the final call.
In the brutal, unforgiving calculus of the road, that 5 pounds is a massive liability. It's dead weight that provides 0 calories and 0 warmth.
But she decides to take it anyway. She takes it, she wraps it tightly in an oilcloth that she physically cut from a kitchen table cover. Another great example of domestic items repurposed for survival.
Right.
She ties the whole bundle tightly with heavy butcher's twine and then seals the knot shut with melted candle wax to waterproof it.
Walker describes the final product looking almost exactly like a sandbag or a bomb.
Which is incredibly fitting, isn't it? Because that small package carries an explosive amount of importance for them. It is their future career. It is their definitive proof that they exist as something other than fleeing victims.
So they finally leave the apartment. They leave the metal key sitting on the counter. They leave the unfinished canvases on the easels. And they ride these wobbly Frankenstein bicycles out of Paris into what historians call the Exode.
The Great Exodus. Millions of panicked people flooding onto the rural roads. Walker describes it as a river of defeat.
But before we follow Hans and Margret on that terrifying road, we actually have to shift gears. Because while the Reys are filing bicycle sprockets in Paris, there is a completely separate drama unfolding hundreds of miles south down in Bordeaux.
Yes. And this is where the historical narrative gets really deeply complicated.
This is the second major narrative thread of the book. Part 2, The Architecture of Denial. We meet a man named Aristides de Sousa Mendes. He's the Portuguese consul general stationed in Bordeaux.
Now, when you or I typically picture a hero in a World War II story, we usually picture a rugged soldier or an undercover spy or a gritty resistance fighter. Mendes is absolutely none of those things.
Not even close.
Not at all. He is a grandfather. He is a wealthy aristocrat. He is a man who strictly believes in hierarchy. He has served his government loyally for 30 straight years.
He believes in the system.
He fundamentally believes that the law is the only thing that protects human civilization from descending into complete chaos.
So he is literally the last guy you would ever expect to just go rogue and break the rules.
Totally. He is a total by-the-book bureaucrat, but then he runs headfirst into Circular 14.
Okay, let's unpack Circular 14. Because the name sounds so incredibly boring, like a standard tax form. But Walker presents it in the book almost like it's a living, breathing villain.
It is the primary villain of this section. Circular 14 was a direct order from the Portuguese dictator Salazar. And we really need to understand what the text of it actually said.
Right, it wasn't just a generic pause on immigration.
No, it didn't just say, please temporarily stop issuing visas. It specifically created targeting categories of, quote, undesirables. It explicitly and legally forbade any Portuguese consul from issuing visas to Jews, to Russians, and to anyone classified as stateless persons.
So basically anyone who is actually in genuine danger from the Nazis.
Precisely. It was a bureaucratic system perfectly designed to default to refusal. It was essentially a do not save order disguised as paperwork.
And suddenly Mendez has thousands of these desperate refugees camped out on the streets outside his consulate in Bordeaux.
The German army is rapidly advancing from the north. These people are terrified, they are starving, and they are desperate to get into Portugal so they can catch transatlantic ships to America.
And the telegraph lines connecting Bordeaux to Lisbon are completely cut right. So he can't even call his boss for guidance.
He is totally isolated. He cannot get official authorization to do anything. And then the catalyst arrives, a man named Rabbi Kruger.
Tell us about the rabbi.
Mendez meets Kruger and actually offers the rabbi a Portuguese visa just for himself and his immediate family. Maybe because the rabbi had slightly different paperwork, or maybe Mendez was just trying to make one small human exception.
And the rabbi refuses the visa.
He refuses it entirely. He looks at Mendez and says, I will not leave my congregation behind. He flat out refuses to save himself if he cannot also save his people.
That specific moment seems to completely break Mendez.
It breaks him wide open. Walker vividly describes Mendez retreating into his private bedroom and locking the door for 2 full days.
2 days, just in his room.
2 straight days, he locks the door he refuses to eat. He is suffering a massive nervous and moral crisis. You really have to try to imagine the crushing internal pressure he was under.
Right.
He is violently torn between his 2 masters. On one side, he has the state. The state has fed him, clothed him, and given him his entire identity and purpose for his whole life.
And on the other side.
On the other side, he has his deep Catholic faith. A faith which expressly tells him he must love his neighbor and protect the innocent.
He has to choose right then and there which set of laws he is going to permanently break. The laws of man or the laws of God.
That is his crucible. And when he finally unlocks the door and comes out, he emerges with an entirely new personal directive. He gathers his bewildered staff and his family, and he says simply, I will issue visas to everyone.
To everyone. No exception.
No background checks, no racial restrictions, no religious restrictions. I will give visas to everyone who asks.
That gives me literal chills. I will issue visas to everyone.
It is a complete and total rebellion against his own government. And that is when the factory begins.
The factory. That's what they actually called it, right?
That's what they called the operation inside the consulate. It became a frantic assembly line of salvation. Mendez, his teenage sons, and Rabbi Kruger, who is now actively helping them, are just assembly lines stamping passports as incredibly fast as humanly possible.
Working day and night.
Yes. There is a harrowing detail in the book where Mendez is gripping the pen and signing so many official documents without resting that his hand literally locks up into a rigid claw.
A claw, like a severe muscle spasm.
A cramp so agonizing and severe that he physically cannot open his own fingers. He has to pause and have someone forcefully massage his hand flat just so he can grab the fountain pen again and keep signing his name.
It's the physical toll of bureaucracy being turned into a tool of active resistance.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. He is weaponizing the very tools of the state. The rubber stamp, the ink pad, his official signature to subvert the state's own evil orders.
Even though he knows the consequences.
He knows with absolute certainty he is destroying his entire career. He knows he will be fired and likely prosecuted, but he just keeps massaging his hand and signing the papers.
So you have Mendez actively destroying his own comfortable life to save thousands of complete strangers in Bordeaux. And meanwhile, in part 3, the Reys are furiously pedaling these rickety junk bikes south, heading right on a collision course for him.
Exactly. And their journey on the road is an absolute nightmare. They have to ride 470 miles south toward the Spanish border.
Walker describes the sound of those handmade bikes, the ticking of the mismatched chains, the wobbling of the bent wheels. The tension is so high because you just know if those terrible bikes fail, they're completely done for.
And they aren't alone out there either. The rural road is utterly packed with broken down cars that have run out of gas, horse-drawn carts, desperate people pushing wheelbarrows full of silverware. It's sweltering hot. The dust is choking everyone.
And then the Luftwaffe shows up.
Yes.
The strafing run scene. This part of the book was incredibly intense. A German Stuka dive bomber spots the massive column of refugees and decides to attack.
It's pure, unadulterated terror. You have the legendary terrifying scream of the Stuka siren, the heavy machine gun fire violently kicking up columns of dirt along the road. Margaret and Hans drop their bikes and dive headfirst into a muddy ditch.
And this is the absolute key moment for the manuscript, the 5 pounds.
It really is.
Because what does Hans do when the bullets start flying?
Instinctively, human biology says cover your head and neck. Most people curl into a tight fetal ball to protect their vital organs. Hans doesn't cover his head. He physically throws his body over the oilcloth manuscript.
That really hammers home the immense value they placed on that book.
Right.
It's the survival of the art versus the survival of the physical body.
It's completely irrational in a practical way, because if he gets shot and dies, the book gets left in the ditch and dies anyway.
Right.
But it's also profoundly moving. He is desperately protecting the one single thing they have left that remains uncorrupted by the violence of the war. He is acting as a literal human shield for Curious George. Or Fifi, as it were.
Wow. But as we said, those Frankenstein bikes don't last forever.
No, they don't. The cheap rubber tires eventually completely disintegrate on the rough roads. They are forced to abandon them and walk. They eventually manage to squeeze onto a packed train boxcar at the city of Orleans.
Which leads to one of the most cinematic, unbelievable moments in the entire book.
The confrontation with the Sûreté officer.
Right. Walk us through that scene.
Picture the claustrophobic scene. They're crammed in this dark, unventilated wooden boxcar. It smells overwhelmingly of unwashed bodies, sweat, and sheer panic. Tensions are incredibly high among the refugees, and a French Sûreté police officer boards the car to inspect papers.
And he immediately hears Hans and Margret speaking with heavy German accents.
And in 1940 rural France, a German accent means only one thing to the authorities.
A spy.
A spy, a fifth columnist, a paratrooper in disguise. The French officer immediately zeroes in on them, and then he notices the suspicious heavy package Hans is nervously clutching to his chest, that wax-sealed oilcloth bundle. He demands to see what's inside.
Because he obviously thinks it's military contraband.
He thinks it's detailed maps of the French defenses, schematics for the invasion, maybe even a bomb. Remember Walker said it looked exactly like a bomb?
So Hans has no choice. He pulls out a blade and cuts the butcher's twine. He unwraps the oilcloth. And what does the hardened French officer actually see?
He doesn't see a map of the Paris rail yards. He sees a monkey. A bright, colorful, whimsical watercolor painting of a little monkey smiling back at him.
And all the tension in the boxcar just instantly snaps.
It completely breaks the frame of reality. You have this grim, terrifying, militarized reality of the boxcar, and suddenly there's this vibrant burst of primary color and childhood innocence. The officer stares at the painting and his entire demeanor shifts. He realizes, deeply undercover, Nazi spies do not carry huge children's books. Spies don't paint smiling monkeys.
It's the monkey miracle.
Yeah.
The art literally saves their lives right there because it undeniably proves their fundamental innocence.
It entirely disarms the authority figure. Maybe it reminded the officer of his own kids, of his own humanity before the war started. Or maybe it just proved beyond a doubt that they were harmless, eccentric artists. Either way, he steps back and lets them pass.
So they survive the train ride, they walk the rest of the way, and finally arrive in Bordeaux. And this brings us to part 4, the convergence. This is where the two massive story threads, the Reys and Mendes, finally collide.
The Reys finally reach the Portuguese consulate, and it is absolute pandemonium. Thousands of people screaming, pushing, begging. But Margret, being the relentless architect she is, uses her sheer assertiveness to navigate them right to the front of the mob.
She just cuts the entire line.
She organizes, she refuses to be ignored or turned away, and against all odds, they finally get inside the main office.
And they meet Aristides de Sousa Mendes.
Walker carefully reconstructs this crucial meeting based on all the historical context. Mendes is physically destroyed at this point. He has been stamping visas essentially nonstop for days. He's a complete wreck. His eyes are hollow. He's trembling.
And he sees this couple standing there with a strange black bundle.
Hans explains it's a children's book they're trying to save.
And Mendes, without hesitating, stamps their Brazilian passports with the Portuguese transit visa.
He gives them the golden ticket. And Walker offers this beautiful analysis here. It's the profound intersection of a ruined, broken diplomat saving a cartoon monkey, and that monkey representing the exact kind of pure innocence that the diplomat is sacrificing his life to protect.
It's incredible.
Right.
But of course, it's not over yet. They have the magical piece of paper, but they still have to physically cross the heavily guarded border into Spain.
And here comes the cruelest twist of the entire saga. By the time the Reys and the other refugees actually get to the main border crossing at Henday, the Spanish authorities have completely slammed the border shut.
Why?
Because Madrid has been contacted directly by the angry government in Lisbon. They officially declare that all visas signed by Mendes are null and void because he has been officially recalled and stripped of his authority.
So the paper is entirely worthless. All that pain, the cramped claw, hand the bleeding knuckles, filing the bike chain, all of it for nothing.
Legally speaking, yes. The border guards look at the paper and say absolutely no entry. But Mendes doesn't just give up and go home. He actually drives his own personal car down to the border to intervene.
This is the part of the book that really gave me chills, because he knows he's already been fired. He knows he has zero actual authority left. But he gets out of his car and aggressively confronts the French police and the Spanish border guards anyway.
He pulls the ultimate bluff. He uses the sheer physical force of his presence. He wears his pristine formal uniform. He shouts commands. He projects absolute authority that he internally knows he no longer possesses.
And the guards blink.
He thoroughly confuses them, and while they are hesitating, he literally leads the massive column of refugees away from that main crossing and marches them down the road to a much smaller, obscure bridge called Bohobia.
And he gets them across the bridge?
He gets them across. He essentially forces the international gate open with nothing but his moral willpower, and there is this deeply symbolic moment that Walker describes happening right in the middle of that bridge.
With the manuscript.
Yes. In the chaotic crush of people pushing across the makeshift binding on the manuscript, the heavy twine and the tired oilcloth, it finally gives way and snaps.
The book falls open right there on the bridge.
The beautiful pages are completely exposed to the elements, and Mendes is standing right there. He leans down and gently helps Hans fold the heavy oilcloth back over the painting to protect it.
Oh, wow.
He physically touches the manuscript, he helps protect the art one final time, and then he looks at Hans and Margret and just tells them to go.
That is the ultimate separation point of the narrative. The Reys cross over into Spain, walking towards safety and a new life, and Mendes turns around and walks back into France, walking directly toward his punishment.
And that punishment is incredibly severe. Which brings us to part 5, the punishment. Walker frames this as a stark study in contrasts. The Reys are rapidly ascending in life, and Mendes is violently descending.
Let's talk about the Reys first. They make it through Spain, they get to Lisbon, they catch a boat to Brazil, and they finally arrive safely in New York in late 1940. They actually made it.
They absolutely did. But on the ship ride over the Atlantic, Hans suffers this deep psychological crisis. He sits there looking at the manuscript, and he feels this overwhelming wave of guilt.
Survivor's guilt.
Exactly. He tells Margret that he feels the art is entirely trivial compared to the immense horror and suffering they just escaped.
Which is completely understandable. I mean, millions of people are suffering. Whole cities are burning to the ground, and he's sitting safely on a boat, carrying a cartoon about a monkey who swallows a jigsaw puzzle piece.
It feels horribly frivolous to him in that dark moment, but Margret steps in with this incredible, profound rebuttal. She looks at him and says, "You must judge the war by the reality of the art."
You must judge the war by the reality of the art. What exactly does she mean by that?
She means that the art is the true constant of humanity. The art is the truth. The brutal war is the temporary aberration. The creation of the art is the living proof that the fascists didn't actually win because they completely failed to kill the creative human spirit.
Right.
The monkey represents a world where pure curiosity is allowed, where innocent mistakes are forgiven. It is the exact polar opposite of the rigid, punitive world they just fled.
That is profound. The monkey essentially is the resistance.
Exactly. So they arrive in New York. They secure a meeting with the massive publishing house Houghton Mifflin in 1941. They get a lucrative publishing deal. But there is a major catch. And this brings us to a completely different kind of erasure in the story.
The name change on the cover.
Right. The publisher absolutely loves the book. But the executives have a big problem with Margret. They believe that having a woman's name prominently on the cover of a children's adventure book might hurt the sales. Or they just want a simplified single brand name. It was the 1940s. Corporate sexism was just standard operating procedure.
So they demand to publish the book solely under the name H.A. Rey, Hans Augusto Rey.
Erasing Margret entirely from the cover of her own creation.
And she actually agrees to this. After she mathematically calculated their survival, after she built the Frankenstein bikes, after she aggressively navigated the mob at the consulate, after she packed the cheese and saved the manuscript.
She is a pragmatist above all else. Remember, she is the grand architect of their survival. She runs the numbers again. She realizes that they desperately need the American money. They need the permanent security.
So she makes a deal.
She willingly trades her public name for the long-term financial survival of their structural enterprise. She agrees to become the invisible silent partner.
So she basically becomes the permanent ghostwriter of the Curious George empire.
For decades, she wrote the actual story outlines. She aggressively managed the business finances. She fiercely negotiated the international contracts. But the reading world only ever saw H.A. Rey. She sacrificed her personal ego to ensure their survival.
Wow. Meanwhile, all the way back in Portugal, Aristides de Sousa Mendes is paying the ultimate price for his unilateral decision to save him. And it is a breathtakingly steep price.
It is truly devastating to read. He returns to Lisbon and immediately faces a harsh disciplinary tribunal orchestrated by Salazar.
And they don't hold back.
They strip him of his prestigious title. He permanently loses his state pension. He is officially disbarred, meaning he legally cannot even practice private law to support his family. And he had a very large family. He had 12 children.
He goes from being a highly respected, wealthy aristocrat to what exactly?
To absolute destitution, total financial and social ruin. Walker describes the massive family estate, the Casa de Pasal, being slowly eaten alive by poverty.
Eaten alive?
Yes, they have to sell off the family silver first, then the antique furniture, then the fine linens. Eventually, things get so unimaginably bad, they're literally ripping up the wooden doors and prying up the floorboards of the mansion just to burn them for firewood to stay warm in the winter.
The man who personally saved an estimated 30,000 human beings is freezing to death in his own ruined home.
Yes, and the detail about the soup kitchen, that part just completely broke my heart.
Tell us about the soup kitchen.
It is the ultimate tragic irony of the whole book. Mendes's family runs out of food entirely. His son has to go stand in line to get daily meals at a local charity soup kitchen in Lisbon. And do you know who ran and funded that specific soup kitchen?
Okay.
HIAS. The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, the very exact organization that was set up to help the thousands of Jewish refugees that Mendes had just saved.
Oh, my God.
So the very people he sacrificed his life to save are now unwittingly feeding his starving children without even knowing who they are serving.
That is practically Shakespearean.
It is. And the tragedy culminates when he dies in 1954. He dies in absolute grinding poverty in a charity hospital ward. He doesn't even own a proper suit to be buried in. He's buried wearing a borrowed rough Franciscan monk's robe.
And the sharp contrast Walker draws right here in the text is just incredible. Because while Mendes is dying alone in a charity ward, Curious George is actively becoming a massive global bestseller.
The Painted Monkey is world famous. The human savior is completely erased. Millions of children are laughing at the monkey's adventures, while the very man who made the monkey's existence possible is forgotten and buried in a borrowed robe.
But thankfully, the story doesn't permanently end there. Because if it did right there, it would just be entirely too depressing.
Right.
This brings us to part 6, the inheritance. This is the story of the resurrection of a legacy.
It starts years later in 1956. Hans and Margret are living very comfortably in New Hampshire now. They are quite wealthy. They're totally safe.
The American dream.
Exactly. And one day they find this tiny, obscure news clipping in a small French expatriate newspaper.
This article about Mendes.
It's a tiny, delayed obituary. It briefly mentions his death, his actions in Bordeaux, and his ultimate poverty. And reading this, the Reys realize for the very first time the man who saved our lives lost absolutely everything to do it.
Walker has a great line here. He writes, "The man in the yellow hat doesn't always come back to save the day in real life."
That is the hard, bitter truth of history. Hans is completely devastated by the news. He feels a tremendous, crushing amount of survivor's guilt. But Margret does what she does best. She goes right back into architect mode.
She decides she's going to fix the structure.
She firmly decides to use their massive accumulated capital, the massive wealth and platform the monkey generated, to aggressively fight his historical erasure. She realizes they owe a debt that can only be paid back with global recognition.
So she launches a massive campaign.
She starts writing letters. She relentlessly writes to Yad Vashem, which is Israel's official Holocaust memorial. She provides what Walker beautifully calls the paper resurrection.
The paper resurrection, I love that.
She tracks down other survivors. She meticulously gathers sworn affidavits. She submits her own detailed testimony. She writes to the committee, "We owe him the world."
And her campaign actually works.
It takes a long time. Official bureaucracy is always notoriously slow to admit its massive historical mistakes. But yes, it works. In 1966, Aristides de Sousa Mendes is officially recognized by Israel as righteous among the nations.
A highest honor.
Yes. His surviving son is invited to plant a carob tree in his honor in Jerusalem. And eventually, much later, after the political revolution in Portugal in 1974, his good name is finally and fully restored in his own home country.
It's amazing, though, that it ultimately took the very survivors he saved to force the world to tell his story. His own state desperately wanted to forget him.
The Portuguese state erased him because he was a massive, glaring embarrassment to their cowardly compliance. His actions proved undeniably that their laws were fundamentally wrong. The survivors remembered him because he was the literal reason they were still breathing.
As we wrap up, our outline mentions a final artifact in the conclusion, the physical passport itself.
Yes. If you go to the Holocaust Museum today, you can actually look through the glass and see Hans and Margret's original Brazilian passport.
The one from the road.
Yes. It still has the faded green cover. If you look closely, you can see the deep sulk sweat stains from the grueling road out of Paris. You can still see the embedded dirt and dust of the exodus caught in the paper fibers.
And inside on the pages.
Right there, inside stamped in faded ink, is the frantic, trembling signature of Aristides de Sousa Mendes.
That signature, it's so much more than just a man's name on a document, isn't it?
Far more. It is a permanent historical testament. It is physical, undeniable proof that in a moment of total global moral collapse, when the entire world was literally burning and the official laws demanded that you turn your back, one single bureaucrat chose to be human.
It perfectly brings us all the way back to that core idea of the 5 pounds, the physical and emotional weight of the things we carry.
The physical weight of the heavy watercolor manuscript, which represented their entire identity and soul, and the massive moral weight of that ink signature, which was their literal permission to continue existing.
And the ultimate legacy here is that incredible contrast. You have these inconvenient names. Margret Rey, who was actively erased by corporate sexism, and Aristides de Sousa Mendes, who was brutally erased by government fascism.
Both massive, powerful systems tried to make them completely invisible. The systems tried to forcefully say, your contributions do not matter.
But the ink survived anyway.
The fragile ink survived the bombs and the dictators. The true story survived. And now today, every single time a parent or a child sits down to read Curious George, they are unknowingly celebrating that massive victory over tyranny.
It really fundamentally changes how you look at Curious George. I mean, the next time I see a picture of that little monkey smiling and flying away, clutching that bunch of colorful balloons, I am not just going to see a cute cartoon. I am going to see a desperate escape.
You will see pure defiance. That cartoon monkey is a war refugee who actually made it out alive. And he only made it out because an exhausted diplomat opened a locked door and said, go.
It is such a powerful, lingering reminder for all of us. In a modern world still completely obsessed with rigid rules and strict borders, what's at the true enduring weight of a simple signature? And what are any of us actually willing to physically or emotionally carry to save our own humanity?
That is the ultimate question Mendes had to answer in his locked bedroom. And it is the exact question Hans and Margret Rey answered by stubbornly carrying those 5 pounds of painted paper every single step of the terrifying way.
Well, that is certainly a lot to process. But what an absolutely incredible, breathtaking story. From a shaking bathtub in Paris to a crowded bridge in Spain to a quiet library in New York. The book is 5 Pounds by Robert Walker. It is definitely worth doing your own deep dive into.
I highly recommend picking it up. It truly changes how you see the world.
Thanks for joining us for this incredible journey. We will see you on the next one.
Goodbye.